In 1992, I had an epiphany regarding the truth, the reality of our eternal soul. That's what an epiphany is. It's when you actually know something for real. Not some information that's come into your head. Some information that has become absolutely solid fact knowledge in your heart and mind. And I suddenly knew. Quite unexpectedly, I had this epiphany. It was while doing some personal research and writing in which I was trying to address the gender issues that I've lived with all my life in Britain, and with the ideas of so-called feminism, which actually I felt was against the female as well, ironically. And so I'd become very confused, and I was trying to work it out, trying to understand it. And I wrote a piece called Freedom in the City. And I looked at the city in terms of its provisions for both male and female. And not long after that epiphany, 2 weeks later, I witnessed an event of light being, which I'll leave a link to a video I made in which I've given a full description of that experience in the first few minutes of that video. After I'd witnessed the light being, and also at the same time a message of universal law of abundance and compassion that was transmitted to me, not in words but through an energy of bliss, when I started talking to people about that experience, the people around me, my friends and family, everybody decided I'd gone mad. Even though I wasn't behaving mad, I didn't rush out and become a born-again Christian. Even though I was just trying to understand how it could physically happen. What it actually means. You know, why have I experienced this? And obviously I understood it as a confirmation of the epiphany that I'd had 2 weeks earlier. And I was at the time at Polytechnic studying history. And I was not, you know, I don't drink, I wasn't taking any drugs. I was living very normally and rationally. I wasn't showing any signs of mental instability, as it were. And then I had this experience and it totally changed my life, and then everybody turned against me, and I really did have a terrible time. I ended up homeless. I couldn't go back to complete my studies. I had to take a year out. And about 3 or 4 months after I'd had that experience, I was so depressed and so miserable, and my mind was flooded with flashbacks then suddenly of very severe child abuse trauma I'd suffered as a child, and all the judgments that came with that. I'd been persecuted in my own home, and I just lost the will to live. I decided that the reason the light being showed itself to me must be because I'm so evil, and so, you know, the best thing I could do really was to end my life, and that even my only son would be better off without me, because if I'm that wicked and evil, then I bet I'm doomed for hell. Well, I'd rather go to hell straight away before I cause any more damage to people. So I went to sleep. Before I went to sleep that night, I fully made my mind up that the next morning I was going to get up, I was going to end my life. Those were the conclusions that I'd come to, and I thought the only way is to end my life. And that night I had a dream. I had a dream of Prophet Muhammad, which was an absolute total shock to me, because the only thing I knew about Islam, having been married to an Iranian who'd had to flee from the regime in Iran, who couldn't return to his own country, I didn't have a very good image of Islam. My husband wasn't a practicing Muslim in the sense of regularly going to mosque and praying 5 times a day, like most of his relatives, though the elderly among them were more, you know, would pray and take part in the fasts and things like this. But most of the youth were not what you'd call practicing Muslims in the sense of an exhibition of faith, but they were Muslims in the sense of how they were with each other and with other people, with their kindness, their generosity, their tolerance, their education, their understanding, their faith in Allah still, even though they didn't all pray 5 times a day, but they had faith in Allah still. And so it was a surprise for me to dream of Prophet Muhammad. And in my dream, he had light shining out of his skin. He had long, dark, brown hair, a very well-trimmed beard. He was very beautiful to look at. And Prophet Muhammad and the men around him were all wearing a headdress, which was a turban with a pointy hat with a turban wrapped around the base. And all the women were wearing black and white headscarves. And Prophet Muhammad appeared delighted to see me, and he stood up, and I knelt down before him and I was expressing my upsets about everything, and he suddenly rose up, and I stood up and he held out his hand, and somebody handed him a black and white scarf, and he gave that to me, and I put it on, and I apologised for entering the mosque without my head covered, because it was just at that moment I realised who he was. That, oh my gosh, this is Prophet Muhammad. I'm in a mosque, and that was in my dream. And I woke up, and about 10-15 minutes after I woke up, I suddenly had a vision of Prophet Muhammad in my head, and I could see his heart. And I just felt such immense love from Prophet Muhammad. And then I was really upset, because I was thinking, oh gosh, what does that mean, that I've got to go and become a Muslim? Am I supposed to go to a mosque now? I didn't feel comfortable going to a mosque and just saying, I've had a dream of Prophet Muhammad. I didn't like Ayatollah Khomeini and their horrible regime, which I felt was antiquated and backwards. And so I was quite dismayed. It was very odd, because the person I'd met in my dream and the Muslims, the people that were around Prophet Muhammad, were completely different from what the world had told me about Islam through the likes of Ayatollah Khomeini or the Saudi leaders. So I loved Prophet Muhammad, but I didn't like the religion, you see. So I felt stuck. And you see, the thing is that in my dream, the reason why I'd entered what looked to me from the outside like a church, and it was only on getting inside that I realised it was a mosque. The only reason why I entered that place is because I was very concerned about my son, who at that time was about 8 years old. Well, getting on, yeah, he was 8.5 years old. And I was concerned about him. And about, you know, how to raise him in this world. Because of the message of light being that I understood now, and how that was going to, what impacts that was having on him through me. Because my mind was polluted and full of all kinds of crap. Obviously, that's why I'd dreamt of Prophet Muhammad, but at the same time felt completely alienated from the traditional, what I knew of as the Muslim faith, which was Sunni and Shia, which I viewed as very backward, warring, not very pleasant. And what I'd witnessed of Ayatollah Kazemeini in Iran, absolutely horrific. Well, same with the Saudi regime. So I'd entered that place, and that was one of the things that I was expressing to Prophet Muhammad in my dream. And I didn't want to take my son into a mosque and to expose him to that kind of extremist Islam, and, you know, all the misogyny and stuff, the inherent misogyny that I felt was in it, the same as I know the inherent misogyny of my own society. And indeed, that was what had set me writing in the first place, that led to my epiphany and then led to me witnessing the light being. And so 2 weeks after I'd had that dream, an acquaintance from Polytechnic who I'd not seen for a long time, he knew nothing at all about my light being experience. He saw me in the city centre in a cafe, and immediately shouted me and wanted to talk to me and said, look, I really need to speak to you about something. And at that moment I couldn't, because I was actually arranged to meet my mum. And so I said, well, I can't talk right now, I've got to go. And I gave him my phone number, and that night he phoned me up and came across. Now, he did not know nothing about my light being experience. He knew nothing at all about my dream of Prophet Muhammad. And he very nervously explained that he'd recently become a Muslim, and that while praying 2 weeks earlier, in the earliest hours of the morning, exactly the time I was having my dream, he said that suddenly he was confronted with a vision of me in his room, as if I was there. And he said, and I've been trying to get hold of you ever since, to find out, you know, where you lived, what your phone number was, in order to tell you about this, because I think Allah wants me to introduce you to Islam. Well, I was just absolutely shocked, and it suddenly felt really, really, it was so serious now, because this wasn't just my dream, was it? Here was somebody who, like I say, was just an acquaintance. He wasn't a Muslim at Polytechnic when I knew him. He'd only recently become a Muslim. He didn't know anything at all about my light being experience, or anything at all about the dream that I'd had that same night that he was having that experience. So I told him about my dream, and I described the men's headwear, because it was unusual to me. I'd not seen that type of headwear really, but I felt it was significant, and I described it to him, the pointy hat with the turban at the base, and he immediately said, oh my gosh, that's the Sufi style of headdress, and I have just become a Sufi Muslim. And so I did then go to the mosque with him, the local Sufi mosque, which actually was a converted Christian church, and it was a very progressive Islamic group. We had mixed zikrs, which are forbidden actually in the so-called Sunni and Shia traditions, and it was through joining that group and I learned the truth of Prophet Muhammad, and I then left the group itself and became, I suppose, what Sufis call a hidden Muslim. And because I understand that the message that I have to give, it isn't limited to one faith. It respects every faith individually and also incorporates all faiths. But my heart is with Prophet Muhammad and Jesus, because Prophet Muhammad loved Jesus and Jesus loves Prophet Muhammad. You see, they're like brothers, and that is what I understood. And I feel it's now I understand why Prophet Muhammad was with the Sufis, because they are closest to the truth of Islam. They understand that we are meant to live with new knowledge. You know, they, as the Quran asks, they understand the truth of the Quran, the fundamental truth of it. They accept it. They know that there are pollutions in there, because the Quran itself explains that there is not one holy book that is not polluted by shaitan. There is not one prophet of Allah that is not polluted by shaitan. The Quran does not exclude itself nor Prophet Muhammad from that, because everything that man has had his hands on is going to be corrupted by his confusions, his lies, his superstitions, his false beliefs. They're all, you know, they're all going to be reflected there, and that is why Allah asks us to sort the wheat from the chaff. And it's very, very disturbing and deeply upsetting to find out that this man, Ayatollah Boroujerdi, the prominent cleric, he spent 11 years in prison for preaching religious tolerance, equality and non-violence inside the repressive theocracy. And this article's been written by Majid Rafizadeh. You know, he's been tortured, he's been sentenced to be executed now by that antiquated regime that usurped the Iranian Revolution, that, you know, was fully funded and supported by Western interests, just as ISIS is fully funded and supported by Western interests, just as the equally repressive so-called opposition, the Saudi regime, is fully financed and empowered by Western interests. And, you know, one of the charges that's been put against him is waging war against God. That's the irony of it. That is the irony of it. His core philosophy is centred on opposing any form of violence. He has called for total acceptance and application of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and he vehemently rejects terrorism and radical Islam. He has founded charities to help the poor, regardless of their religious or political beliefs, and advocates for human rights, democratic values, peace, women's rights, social justice, freedom and inequality. So, you know, basically, he's the same as any one of us in the West who are standing up for the same, isn't he? The enemy. So I have this message for Iran's clerics. As somebody who has met Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, you're all going to hell, okay? Because you're so wrong, and you think you're so big and powerful in this world, don't you? Well, you're all going to die, every single one of you. And you will stand before Allah, and you will have to account for why you killed one of Allah's true supporters, who lives by 21st century knowledge, as the first page of the Quran asks you to do. Okay? And why are you not supporting this man? Why are you saying that he is an enemy of God, that he's waging a war against God? What God? He's not waging a war against Allah. He's standing up for humanity, whom Allah created and loves, who Allah gave rights to. Okay? So who's the God here? You think that this man is waging a war against Allah because he's supporting, he is a true Muslim and lives by 21st century knowledge. He lives by compassion, kindness, mercy, understanding, forgiveness, tolerance, patience. Okay? You think that you can torture and execute him, and you're going to stand before Allah and say, well, he was waging a war against you, Allah. Really? Yes. Oh my gosh. How are you going to feel when you realise that it's you lot, you antiquated clerics in Saudi Arabia and Iran, who are waging a war against Allah? And for every single person like this man that you oppress and torture and execute, okay, there are 100 of you will have no place in paradise. There's no place in paradise for liars and murderers, and who issue false accusation. You know what Prophet Muhammad said? Those who falsely accuse and condemn shall never be forgiven. Never! And that is the same as going to happen to all of you. You've got very short lives in these little frail bodies of yours. Any of you could go at any minute. Well, I can tell you, 100% sure, your body will die, but your soul and spirit will remain, and you will face Allah. And you are living wrong. And that is why, in my dream, now I understand why Prophet Muhammad was with the Sufi Muslims. Because they are the closest to true Islam. And he is a Sufi Muslim. He's with the Sufi Muslims. Okay? He might not call himself a Sufi Muslim, but all Muslims, the Muslim people on the ground, need to get with the Sufis. They are the closest. Prophet Muhammad has shown us the way. He's shown you the way. Please believe me, I am not a person that wanted to go around preaching about Allah, or I've never set myself up as a powerful, some sort of religious icon. Okay, I don't want that, because the whole idea is for the people to be empowered, for the people to follow the true golden light of Jah, of Allah. And so Muslims need to support this man. Western people need to support this man. All the Western people out there have been indoctrinated against Islam as a, extremist faith. That is not true. That's the lie. That's the lie of the West. That's what they've been promoting. They've usurped Islam like they've usurped Judaism, like they've usurped Christianity, and turned them into the absolute opposite of what the original prophets that those religions are based on preached. And you know, in the West, where's the BBC talking about him? What publicity does the BBC give to Muslims like this man who are being persecuted? What publicity does the BBC give to the Arabian, Saudi people who stand up the same as him, who are getting executed? What publicity? None. Oh, but you know, a group of ISIS people with the faces covered, brandishing the swords. Oh, full publicity for them. And Western people are now indoctrinated with this Islamophobia. Do you really think that by pouring your hatred, your indoctrinated hatred, onto average, everyday, normal Muslims who do not support those kind of extremist actions, you think by pouring your hatred on them that you're helping? But you can pour hatred on innocent people, but you cannot support innocent people, innocent Muslims, true Muslims. And that's why I know that some people, okay, they really couldn't give a shit about Islam, about anything really. Anything that gives them a chance to hate and stamp on people, they will pick up on it. They'll use it to let off a bit of their own steam and angst. And the BBC feed that kind of mentality. All the people baying for blood out there, you are the problem. Because instead, you should be standing by and protecting people like this man. And it is an absolute travesty that an Islamic nation, you know, that Islam has been brought into meaning antiquation, that these antiquated elites have taken over. And Prophet Muhammad does not support the division, the Sunni Shia division, does not support it. Allah does not support it. Allah does not like it. Allah loves the people. Allah asked the people to come together. Where's Prophet Muhammad? He's with the Sufis. So get with the Sufis. Start learning about the truth of your Prophet, the truth of Allah. Because there's a lot of antiquated stuff in the Quran, but there are stepping stones of guidance, and the Sufis know them. There's 12 points in the Quran, and the Sufis know them. And that's why the Sufis are being persecuted, because the people who've usurped Islam, who want to live in 650 AD, what is at the heart, what is at the foundation of why they fight so much? Because they want power over women and children. They want to fuck them, because that's what it is. I'm sorry if you don't like a swear word, but that's the action of it. It is an abomination. And we know it. We've got the 21st century knowledge to prove it. I've survived it. And so why would Prophet Muhammad come to me in a dream? Why did I experience a person made out of light? Why? Is it because I genuinely care? Because I have survived? Because my faith is like an iron rod? And so why am I making this video? To plead for this man's life. To plead for the world to wake up. To plead for the children. And to plead with the Iranian clerics and the Saudi elites to stop in your evils. That's why Allah offers forgiveness, because people are committing wrongs, they are committing crimes, they are believing false doctrines. They are not living good and lawful. And the Quran asks Muslims to live by 21st century knowledge. and to abandon old ways and traditions. Women have rights, equal rights. No, you are not to sexually abuse children. They're not fit for marriage. It damages them. We've got the evidence, we've got the knowledge to prove that. I can speak from personal experience. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the people that want to murder this man, the only reason why they want to do it is because they want to hang on to their rights to treat women and children like sex objects and deny their rights. And that is exactly Allah's judgment, okay? That is the judgment all you antiquated clerics will be facing when you face Jah, when you face Allah, okay? That is exactly the judgment you shall be facing, because it is your own judgments. You have judged against this man who Allah fully supports, who is close to Prophet Muhammad's heart. He is a man after Prophet Muhammad's heart. Prophet Muhammad is with this man, and you're going to kill him? You see, it's not Allah who sends people to hell, who refuses people entry, souls and spirits entry into paradise. No, 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 no. Your own spirit will speak against you. You just can't, because your own guilt will weigh you down. There's no way that you can be in paradise. And that's why it's important to be forgiven on this earth. And that's why Prophet Muhammad said to people, die before you die. And do it. Let the person you were, everything you believed, no matter how many wrongs you have done, you need to stop it. Let that person die. It was a character that was developed on wrong thinking. Get your thinking right, and Allah forgives. And if you don't believe in Allah's forgiveness, then you won't do it. And if you do believe in Allah, then you'll find the courage and strength to stand up for this man. And the people of Iran, you will stand up for this man as true Muslims and as people who truly support God. Because it's not him who's waging a war against God. It's your antiquated clerics. And the same with the Saudis. And as I say, the disgusting, despicable BBC, who do not give any publicity to true Muslims, but they're there with the spotlights, ready to show us images of ISIS or Iranian clerics issuing harsh punishments. You know, I mean, as far as I understand now, this is the Armageddon. There is a spiritual war going on in heaven, because the religions are so infected and polluted. And it is down to humanity to stand up for our rights, because people in the West who are standing up for exactly the same as him, we're being exactly persecuted the same. Except in our countries, people aren't being executed openly yet, are they? No, they end up dead like Princess Diana and Dodi, don't they? In their car accidents. It is time. It is time for people to get together, to abandon the divisions, abandon the hate, to speak out for people like Ayatollah Boroujerdi. Okay? For the people to come out in force, to know, as I've explained to you, as I've shared with you, not because I want to big up myself, Okay, it's got nothing to do with me personally. I'm just the vessel, the host, to share the information. And I share that information honestly and truthfully. And, you know, what can I say? Please, 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 please stand up for this person. Please, people in the West, you know, Western people, please. If you don't like radical Islam, it is Muslims like this man that we need to support. Okay? And Muslim people, give him your support. Share this video. Share the information. I will leave you the links. And I will leave a link to one of my videos that very briefly, in the first few minutes, describes my light being experience. You know, and the only reason why I'm sharing these and I'm doing this is because, you know, I do love people and I love Earth, and we really, really, really do need to liberate ourselves from antiquated nonsense and get with Jah and Allah love.